Hello and welcome to G Fun Facts Online. Today, we're talking about something huge. I mean, literally huge. Imagine an expanse of land so vast, it stretches from the forests of Appalachia to the deserts of the Great Basin and all the way to the icy tundra of Alaska. Now imagine you own a piece of it. Well, if you're an American, you do. We're talking about America's public lands, roughly 640 million acres, or about 28% of the entire country, held in common by every citizen. This isn't just empty space. It's a stunning tapestry of national parks, forests, wildlife refuges, and sweeping rangelands. It's a repository of natural resources, a sanctuary for wildlife, and a deep part of the national identity. But here's the thing. For over a century, these lands have been at the heart of one of America's most intense and enduring debates. The fight over our public lands is a complex conflict that pits powerful economic interests against the urgent need for conservation, and the public's right to enjoy these spaces against the push for private control. So who should control these lands, and for what purpose? Should they be a fuel tank for the nation's economy, or a wild sanctuary preserved for future generations? Today, we're diving into the passionate, high-stakes battle for the soul of America's shared birthright. To understand today's fight, we have to look back at how we got here. The story begins right after the American Revolution, when the original colonies handed over their vast western territories to the new central government. For most of the 19th century, the government's main policy was simple: get rid of it. Land was a commodity to be sold or given away, to pay off war debts, encourage settlement, and fuel westward expansion. The famous Homestead Act of 1862, for example, gave away 160-acre plots to citizens, ultimately transferring a staggering 270 million acres into private hands. But as the century turned, a new idea began to take hold. Visionaries like John Muir and President Theodore Roosevelt argued that some landscapes were simply too precious, too beautiful, and too wild to be privatized. This was the dawn of the American conservation movement. In 1872, Yellowstone became the world's first national park, a revolutionary concept. Then came the Forest Reserve Act, allowing the president to set aside forests from the public domain. This was the pivotal shift from a policy of disposal to one of retention. Over the 20th century, the big agencies we know today were born: the Forest Service, the National Park Service, and the Bureau of Land Management, or BLM. This new era was cemented in 1976 with a law called the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, or FLPMA. It made it official: the remaining public lands would stay in public hands. It also established a guiding principle for agencies like the BLM and Forest Service: multiple use. This one term is the source of endless conflict, because it means they have to somehow balance the often competing demands of mining, logging, grazing, recreation, and conservation, all on the same land. And because most of this retained land is concentrated in the 11 western states and Alaska, it has created a deep and lasting tension between local communities and the federal government, which is often the largest landowner for hundreds of miles around. This brings us to the first major battleground in the public lands debate: the economy. This is a fierce tug-of-war over resources and revenue. On one side, you have the argument for resource extraction. For generations, federal lands have been a powerhouse for the American economy. They hold massive deposits of oil, natural gas, coal, and valuable minerals like gold and copper. In fact, revenue from federal mineral development is the second largest contributor to the U.S. Treasury, right after the IRS. Proponents argue that opening up more federal land to drilling and mining would create hundreds of thousands of jobs and pour billions into the economy. Then there's timber. The nation's 154 national forests were originally set up to provide a sustainable supply of wood. While logging has decreased, supporters say responsible harvesting is key to preventing catastrophic wildfires and supporting rural, forest-dependent communities. And we can't forget ranching. an industry deeply woven into the fabric of the American West. The BLM and Forest Service manage grazing permits across millions of acres, and for many family ranches, this access to public forage is the only thing keeping them in business. From this perspective, public lands are an engine of traditional industry, and the multiple-use mandate should prioritize economic development. But there is a powerful counterargument, and it's one that has been gaining serious momentum. This view states that the greatest economic value of our public lands lies not in what we can take out of them, but in what we leave in them. Welcome to the outdoor recreation economy. In 2023, this sector accounted for nearly $640 billion of US GDP and supported around 5 million jobs. That is an economic juggernaut. And much of this activity, the hiking, camping, hunting, fishing, and boating, happens on federal public lands. National parks alone contributed over $50 billion to the economy in 2022. Studies have shown that western counties with more protected federal land, like national parks and wilderness areas, actually experience faster growth in population, jobs, and income. These scenic landscapes act like magnets, drawing in tourists, new residents, and entrepreneurs, creating diverse and resilient local economies that aren't tied to the boom and bust cycles of resource extraction. This fundamental clash of economic visions fuels the fiery debate over transferring federal lands to the states, a movement often called the New Sagebrush Rebellion. Proponents say states could manage the lands more efficiently and generate more revenue without federal red tape. But opponents paint a grim picture. They argue states simply don't have the money to manage these vast landscapes, especially when it comes to fighting wildfires, a bill that can cost the federal government over $3 billion a year. To cover those costs, states would likely be forced to sell the land to the highest bidder, leading to privatization and a massive loss of public access for everyone. Beyond the economic calculus, federal lands serve another vital role. They are the nation's primary reservoir of biodiversity and our best defense in the fight against climate change. The vast unbroken habitats on public lands are essential for countless species. They are home to more than 3,000 unique species, including many that are threatened or endangered. For animals like the Florida panther or the California condor, these federal lands are their last best hope for survival. Public lands also provide what scientists call ecosystem services, the life-sustaining benefits we get from nature for free. For instance, our national forests are the single largest source of fresh water in the United States, providing clean water to about 60 million Americans. That service alone is valued at nearly $4 billion a year. These lands also act as a colossal carbon sink. The trees, soils, and grasslands absorb and store enormous amounts of carbon dioxide, with U.S. forests alone offsetting about 11% of the nation's annual emissions. The conservation and restoration of these lands is a key strategy for mitigating climate change. Some of the most intense battles are fought over designations that prioritize this conservation role. The Antiquities Act of 1906 gives presidents the power to declare national monuments to protect areas of historic or scientific interest. But these designations are often controversial, with critics arguing they lock up valuable resources. Even more restrictive are wilderness areas, created by the Wilderness Act of 1964. These are the most protected lands in the country, where motorized vehicles and even bicycles are prohibited to preserve their wild character. Supporters see these designations as essential, while critics see them as restricting access and economic opportunity. This brings us to the third pillar of the debate: public access. For millions of Americans, these lands represent a birthright, a place to roam, hunt, fish, and connect with nature. But one of the biggest challenges is that millions of acres of public land are, bizarrely, inaccessible. This is the landlocked problem. Thanks to 19th century policies that granted square-mile sections of land to railroads, the West is covered in a checkerboard pattern of public and private ownership. The result is that huge chunks of your public land are completely surrounded by private property, with no legal way to get to them. One of the key tools to fix this is the Land and Water Conservation Fund, or LWCF. This clever program uses royalties from offshore oil and gas drilling, not taxpayer dollars, to buy critical pieces of private land from willing sellers. These purchases can unlock huge areas of landlocked public land, creating new access for everyone. And even when we can access our lands, we sometimes fight over how to use them. Conflicts between motorized recreation, like ATVs and snowmobiles, and non-motorized pursuits, like hiking and horseback riding, are a constant challenge for land managers trying to balance everyone's right to enjoy their public lands. So where does this leave us? The battle for America's public lands is more than just a political debate. It's a reflection of our deepest national values. It's a contest between resource exploitation and environmental stewardship, between local control and the national interest, and between competing visions for the future. Are these 640 million acres a storehouse of commodities to be tapped, or a sustainable economic engine of recreation and quality of life? Are they an invaluable reservoir of biodiversity and a shield against climate change? Or are they simply our shared backyard, a place for everyone to roam free? As we face the challenges of the 21st century, the debate over this contested commons will only intensify. Finding a balance that honors the immense economic, ecological, and cultural value of these lands is one of the great challenges of our time, and the outcome will define the legacy we leave for generations to come. Thanks for tuning in to G Fun Facts Online.